I have so many things to say because we've spoken about Gen Zs a lot on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 5-year-old podcast, and 5 years ago, Gen Zs were like 20,
Yes.
19. Some of them are 25 now.
Mm-hmm.
One of the narratives that's commonly discussed amongst millennials is that, hey, we kind of feel like the Gen Zs are aging faster than we were.
Yeah.
Like you'll see graying of hair earlier,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see the skin age earlier, you'll see muscles age earlier, they'll get more injuries. Like the stuff that happened to us at like 31, 32 is happening to them sometimes at 23, 24.
Yes.
And it's not their fault.
No.
What you spoke about, early antibiotic use,
Yes.
has to have played some kind of a role, at least in urban Gen Zs all over the world.
Yes.
Right? It's not their fault. Other than the fact that social media was introduced to them early, other than the fact that there's a lot of comparison mindsets now, there's a lot of insecurity.
Yeah.
That's increasing their cortisol levels, and that's also making them age further.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of stuff that happened in their lives before age 10 that they weren't in control of,
Yes.
but they're paying the price for it now.
Yeah. And that's the reason why any treatment, when we talk about overall health or treating any disease, we have to pay attention to the gut. Yes, it has a long-term impact, but if we don't work on it, if we don't improve it, we're just setting ourselves for more and more aging, more and more disease and disability down the road.
Okay. So with antibiotics, what's the protocol? Say if I'm a 31-year-old male, I have a bad fever. Am I supposed to take antibiotics on the first or second day of my fever?
So you really need to get checked out. You first of all need to determine whether this infection is in fact caused by bacteria or virus. Until you know that, let's say you get a test, right, to figure out is this flu, is this virus versus actual bacteria. Then you can treat accordingly. Now we have amazing tests, we can do that. We don't need to just jump to antibiotics, right? So always get tested, figure out what's actually causing it.
So you're saying antibiotics are so intense as a format of carpet bombing for your gut that you need to check in the first place whether or not bacteria is responsible for the illness that you're going through.
Yes.
And once you have the green light based on that test, then you can consider going for antibiotics.
Exactly. Then you know you're using it appropriately. And once you start antibiotics, the other important thing I always want to highlight is you want to take it for the right duration. Because often people say, I really don't want to take antibiotics. I know how bad they are. So they take it for a few days and they're like, oh, I'm feeling good. I don't need more. So they stop it. That actually breeds more resistance. So next time the infection comes back, it's going to be even harder to treat.
Because you're giving your body a tiny dose of it and your body's own internal immune system fights it off.
Yes.
And therefore, the next time the antibiotic won't work in the first place.
Yeah. And you might not get rid of all the bacteria. You might feel better if 50% of the bacteria dies. You're like, I'm done. I don't need this. But the other 50% is still there. So maybe next month, that's going to become another infection.
So the only way to do it right is to first get yourself tested for a bacterial infection and then get an exact prescription from a doctor.
Yes.
Because if you take it for 2 days instead of 5 or 6 or whatever the doctor says, that's going to cause long-term harm to your body.
Yeah.
Wow.
And often what happens is there's so many antibiotics. So think about like if you have a whole list of weapons to use, right? You have a small gun to an atom bomb. So with antibiotics, we have small guns, we have atom bombs. So you don't want to use the big guns early on when you don't need it.
Are you comfortable talking about the big ones?
Yeah. So there are some antibiotics we really like to reserve for really bad infections. So sometimes people say, oh, doctor, just give me that antibiotic. It's so much easier to take. I just have to take it once a day. This one, I got to take 4 times a day. I don't want to do that. It's not about convenience. Because you want to match the right type of antibiotics to the disease or the bacteria you actually have.
It's an art.
It's an art. And it's a science, right? So that's why identifying, is it bacterial or virus? What type of bacteria am I dealing with? Which antibiotic is going to get the job done is so important. It's not just about, doctor, I have this antibiotic left over. Can I just take that? No, don't make that mistake.
Now let's flip this whole narrative. Say if you're used to taking antibiotics every time you're unwell, which is a lot of
people,
urban
yes.
people. Could you explain what's going wrong inside their body post that antibiotic use?
Yes. So think about a field or a garden, right? There's lots of flowers, there's some rocks, some weeds too. I take antibiotics, I wipe out everything. Antibiotics will kill majority of the bad bacteria, but there's some that's going to be left over. So next time what happens is those bad bacteria take over more territory. There's nothing to compete, right? Open field, I can grow as much as possible. So now the bad bacteria are taking over more territory. So the next time I take antibiotic, same thing happens again. So now instead of bad bacteria being 10%, now they're 50% of your gut bacteria. That's going to affect your hormones, your immune system, your mood. So it's not just a matter of treating that infection. The long-term impact, you'll feel it in so many different areas of your health.